So if you're anywhere near the software world, you've definitely heard these buzzwords thrown around. Monoliths versus microservices. It's always framed like this epic showdown. But what does it actually mean for how we build stuff? Today, we're going to cut right through the hype and get to the bottom of one of the biggest choices you can make in software design.
At its heart, the entire debate really just boils down to this one simple question. Do you build your application as one single, massive system, or do you break it down into dozens, maybe even hundreds of tiny little independent services that all have to talk to each other? That's the choice we're unpacking.
All right, first up, let's talk about the classic monolith. For most projects, this is where it all begins, and honestly, for some pretty good reasons.
A monolith is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's one big thing. Everything. The user interface, all the business logic, the code that talks to the database, it's all packaged together in one large code base. Think of it like a car, where the engine, the chassis, and the interior are all fused into one inseparable piece.
Now, this simplicity is a huge advantage, especially when you're just starting out. Development is way more straightforward, debugging is easier because you can trace everything that's happening in one single system, and the communication between different parts of the app, it's lightning fast because it's all happening in the same place.
But what happens when that simple little project becomes a massive, successful application? Well, that's when that solid foundation of the monolith can really start to crack and just crumble under its own weight.
And this is where the pain really starts. The codebase gets so big that just maintaining it is a nightmare. Everything is so tightly connected that changing one little thing can accidentally break 5 other things. You're totally stuck with the technology choices you made at the very beginning. And maybe the scariest part? A single bug in some minor feature can bring the entire system down.
So to solve these messy, complicated problems of a giant monolith, a new idea came along: microservices. And this is a completely different way of thinking about building software.
Instead of one giant application, you build lots of small, independent ones. Each service has exactly one job, one single business capability, and it does that one job really well. So the user authentication service only handles logins. The payment service only handles transactions. They're all totally separate applications that just communicate with each other.
The whole philosophy is built on a few key ideas. Services are loosely coupled, which means you can update the payment service without even touching the login service. They're small and super focused on a single business need. And, critically, they're resilient. The idea is, if the recommendation service fails, the rest of the application should just keep on working. So you can probably see how these advantages are a direct answer to all the monolith's problems, right? Different teams can work on different services without constantly tripping over each other. Need more power for video processing? You just scale up that one piece, not the whole app. You can even write one service in Python and another in Java. It's all about flexibility and independence.
Now, this all sounds pretty perfect, doesn't it? A clear solution. But this is where our story takes a bit of a turn. See, microservices are not a silver bullet, and they come with their own set of really serious hidden complexities.
And this phrase right here, this is the villain of our story. It's a warning. It's what happens when you try to get all the benefits of microservices, but you do it wrong, and you end up with the absolute worst of both worlds.
A distributed monolith is a total nightmare scenario. You get all the complexity of managing dozens of separate services, the tricky network communication, the separate deployments, but they are all still completely dependent on each other, just like they were in the monolith.
So how do you know if you've fallen into this trap? Well, you gotta watch for these warning signs. If one tiny change forces you to redeploy 10 different services in a very specific order, you've got a problem. If all your so-called microservices are sharing one giant database, you've kind of missed the point. Think of this as a checklist for architectural red flags.
And look, even when you do it right, it's just plain hard. You're no longer debugging a single application, you're debugging a super complex distributed system where failures can happen in the network between your services. Testing becomes exponentially more complicated, and just managing all the separate infrastructure is expensive.
So, after all that, how do you choose? We've seen the good and the bad of both architectures. The answer, as it turns out, isn't really about technology. It's about people.
And this right here is the most important takeaway from this whole explainer. You shouldn't choose microservices just because it's the trendy thing to do. You should choose them because you have an organizational problem, a problem with how your teams work together that this architecture can actually solve.
So you have to ask yourself some really honest questions. First off,
Is your team so big that developers are constantly stepping on each other's toes inside a single code base?
Next question. Are your release schedules constantly getting held up because Team A is waiting for Team B to finish their part in the same giant application? Are these development bottlenecks actually slowing your business down?
And maybe the most important question of all, are you being realistic? Do you actually have the expertise, the tools, and the resources to manage the massive operational overhead that comes with a distributed system? So here's the bottom line. Unless you can confidently answer yes to those big organizational questions, don't chase the hype. Start with a monolith. Keep it simple until simple just doesn't work for you anymore.
I want to leave you with this final thought. It's so easy to look at giants like Netflix and want to copy their architecture, but their solutions solve problems at a scale that most of us will literally never face. So the real question isn't monolith or microservices. It's what problem am I actually trying to solve right now?